inspiring you to set the marketplace ablaze in partnership with an awesome and limitless God. This is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, and this isn't business as usual. Here's your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shay Bynes.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Shay Bynes, and our goal here is to inspire you to operate your business completely yielded and in partnership with our awesome and limitless God. Being a kingdom-driven entrepreneur is not the same thing as being a Christian who happens to be a business owner. A kingdom-driven entrepreneur is motivated by seeing an increase of the kingdom of God through the work that they do in business, and they are propelled forward by operating from the truth of Matthew 6:33. They seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, knowing that all things will be added. So that's why we're here, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today. Today's episode is sponsored by the Kingdom Writers Conference. This conference was created to help you go from unknown author to consistent book sales by gaining the courage to step out, initiate purposeful partnerships, and sell more books using the power of collaborations. I'm excited to be one of the many speakers at this online event, and it kicks off on September 12th. And guess what? The conference is absolutely free to register. Registration is open now, so head on over to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/KW. That's KW for Kingdom Writers. And again, that's kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/KW and learn more about this free conference and get yourself registered. And now on to today's guest. My guest today is Pete Jones, CEO of Daily Kairos and the creator of the Daily Kairos Journal. Pete is a corporate dropout turned full-time entrepreneur who left his big paycheck behind to align with what God was putting on his and his wife's hearts. We talk about his adventures in business and how he started to draw closer to God and look at his entire life and business as ministry. I think you'll enjoy hearing about how he ended up in the e-commerce business, providing solutions in the marketplace to help others to engage with God, and how he is growing and working in partnership with God himself, led and empowered by the Holy Spirit. So listen in and enjoy my conversation with Pete Jones. Pete Jones, what is going on, man?
How's it going, Shay? Great to be here.
I am super delighted to have you here. Now, many who listen to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast will already be familiar with your journal because we've been giving shout outs to the Daily Kairos Journal over the months, little commercial spot, and people have really been enjoying it. And so I'm glad that I now have a chance to speak to the founder of the Daily Kairos Journal. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's humbling to be here. It's great.
Awesome. And now, so are you the CEO of the company? You and your wife work together. So how does this dynamic work with the company?
Yeah, I'm technically the CEO, even though I just rarely ever use that. But my wife and I work together, and then we have a couple of assistants as well.
And that's it. So it's just you two and a couple assistants?
Yeah, we're pretty lean. We try to stay
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so there's all kinds of things I want to talk to you about and just explore with you. So let's start off with just the beginning of entrepreneurship for you. Because my understanding is that both of you are corporate dropouts turned adventurers turned full-time entrepreneurs. So take me back to that part of the journey.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. It's a great journey. I started right outside of college. I got a job in New York City. That's where I wanted to be. Lived up in Harlem for a while, sales guy. And I loved it. And I just wanted to be in New York, and that was all that mattered. And then I got a second job after that initial sales job, a really, really great job. But I always had this in the back. I mean, I'd always been doing some entrepreneurial things on the side, but I took the second job because it paid well and because it would allow me to save up and travel.
You wanted to travel.
I wanted to travel, but then the job was really good. So I'm like, maybe I should stay. But the thing that really turned my mindset around was I felt like I had this conversation with my partner, and I said, I feel like I'm selling to a wall and my brain's frying and I'm going numb. And she's like, well, if you can just get through that, you'll make a lot of money and do well. I'm like, well, I can't get through that. So I was like, I'm out. And I left, and we traveled for a few months South and Central America, and then came back in 2015. And I'm like, we already made the big plunge to leave corporate world. We can always go back. Let's see what's going on. So Jordan and I have a background in marketing, web design, and some basics there. So we just started really going door to door in a local beach town for one summer and just building websites. And that turned into social media management. And then in 2016, we really honed in on Facebook advertising. And that's really what our bread and butter was for the next, well, up until now. So we
Yeah.
started our agency around that time and worked with small businesses, got into the info space, and then here we are with Daily Kairos, e-commerce.
Nice. So it sounds like the big motivator from leaving the corporate world was just, listen, this is totally going to burn me out. This is not satisfying to the soul at all. I can't keep this up. And you had a desire to travel. So it was almost like the two of those things together. It was almost like the freedom to be able to do that and the flexibility, along with like not having, getting to a point where you feel like you're doing soul crushing work.
Yeah. And I think it's also hard if you're an entrepreneur, you just have that thing in you, even if you don't know exactly what it is, and you just
Yes.
you want to go.
Yeah.
So I can't say it's always been easier. It definitely hasn't been, but
Yeah, no, totally. Now it's interesting because, you call the journal, and we'll get to that part in a second, Daily Kairos Journal.
yeah.
And so that's with intentionality that you call it that, of course, talking about like Kairos moments and Kairos time and all of that. And I want to dig into that, but I know there's the background story that led to that. And I want to get underneath that. So I suspect you had a whole lot of Kairos moments that led to the fact that you guys launched the Daily Kairos Journal. So talk to me about the adventure with God that you were having behind the scenes as you guys were feeling led to transition from what you were doing, to something else. What was that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was raised like way back since I was 11 to journal as I read the Bible. Back then, I didn't really understand it, but so I always had that part of my devotional study was with the Bible and studying. And then we were traveling in an RV. I think I mentioned to you, we were running our business from the road. And so that gave us more time to reflect and to write and to journal. But we came home in 2019 to have our first child. And that was, as we all have different emotions with our first children. And some I was prepared for and some I weren't. The one thing I wasn't prepared for was the lack of focus. And I couldn't focus on work, let alone Netflix or work. I couldn't do anything. And just for those first month or so. And I had this moment when I was sitting with my oldest, and she was maybe a month old. And I remember it as clear as day. And I just like kind of slammed my laptop down, and I'm like, I'm so done with this. And then my mind just had all these images flooding through of like these different layouts of a journal. So I put her down, ran over to this table. The sun was setting, the light was on the table. Really, it was. And I just like spread out all these papers and just started drawing. And, because when I was in the RV, I had a little bit of a format I was using. I had this idea to give God praise for the little things. I called them taps, today's answered prayers.
I like that. Yes.
Yeah. And things like that. I was just trying to recognize him throughout the day. And that was going on for 2 years. And I was recording it and then never really thought anything of it until this moment. So wrote out all these things, showed it to my wife. She's like, that's cool. And then time went on. But a month passed in that summer, and then she was going for a run listening to a sermon, and she's like, Pete, I really feel like the Lord is prompting me to let you have some creative space, which meant that she was going to, because we work for ourselves at our agency, so she was going to take a lot of work. And I'm like, all right, that's the green light. And so that summer is when I really hit the ground running with Kairos.
Wow.
And we creating it, and then we launched Kickstarter that fall.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you launched well, hold on, I got to go back. So I love that. So the Lord then leads your wife to give that green light. So then you have that space. Again, we're talking about the provision of God. Like this all works out, right? So now you have the space to do that. And now with the other business, did you guys have employees, or were you guys really lean on the agency side as well?
Yeah, it was just us doing a couple of contractors. So
yeah. So she really did have to pull in a bulk of the work to do that. So
she did.
Shout out Jordan. Shout out to Jordan. And so then you go into the summer and you have this, I'll just call it a divine download, because you got a picture of what this thing looks like, laid it out. And then what? So you decide, like, how'd you decide on Kickstarter?
Yeah. So once I started, once I had like the concept out, I knew I wanted to just put it into some sort of format. So I did the classic, spiral bound staples, and I had my small group go through it and got a little bit of feedback. I didn't test it that much, but once I had, some good feelings there, I founded a graphic designer who was a Christian, and she basically took these terrible drawings and made them what it is. She just could read my mind so well. So she got it, into that beautiful looking format. And then, because from before we had it all like hashed out. I was like, all I know is that I want one side of this journal to be a side where you kind of get into the space to hear from God.
Right.
Because we are so distracted and we come from a phone and we come from a screen and then we try to read and it's like, no. So like by going through that left side and just kind of working through it, when you get across the bridge, you're prepared. And so that was like the main concept. And once you had that, then I just tried to find some suppliers, wanted to find the look of it. I'm a minimalist by nature, so I just wanted to keep it very, very simple, but still kind of elegant. And then we decided on Kickstarter because that's just, I don't know the exact reason. I just knew that there were some journals that had some success. And I thought, let's just give it a shot and we can raise the money.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's super good. You get the interest up front. You get that confirmation on the front end. And it's like, okay, great. We have a confirmation in the funding to then grow from there. I love that. I want to go back. You said that you've been journaling for years. Like, so that's just something that you've done. So when you were journaling, were you just kind of journaling through the scriptures? Were you journaling in terms of, engaging God in conversation and writing that out? Like, talk to me about kind of your journaling journey.
Yeah, I actually just grabbed, I don't know where it is, but I grabbed that original journal I found at my dad's house from when I was 11. And at that point, I was just really would read a psalm or something, and I would just like write what I learned and how it could apply. And of course, one of them I found was like, don't talk back to your dad, it was like that. And so that's kind of how I started it there. But as I got older, I actually used to write a lot of poetry, and I have books of poetry that I haven't really got out there, but I just like to journal. It wasn't so much so until probably to middle to late 20s when I started getting back to the Bible journaling. But through that time, with all the traveling, I was always journaling about feelings and what I was thinking and whatever. So it was super helpful. But then once I moved on to, going back to the basics, it helped you to see what God was doing,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. And so I'm curious to know, before you started Daily Kairos, when you were doing the digital marketing agency and the work that you all were doing there, when you were doing that work, did you have were you already in a posture of, I get to do this business with God, like I get to seek God in the midst of this particular work? Or were you kind of compartmentalized? Like, I journal and I engage God in these areas of my life, but I'm not quite there on the business side. What's that looked like for you?
That's a really, really great question, because I look back at it now and I'm like, wow, we had a really good thing with what we were doing. We did really well. We served our people really well. And at times I do miss it. And I was thankful, but it didn't feel as much as a partnership with God. Now, I think my mind, I remember, it's crazy because I do journal, which is great, because as a parent, as you know, I mean, just as me, I forget what happened yesterday. So,
Right.
But I go back and I look of the time leading up to like when Kairos came to be. And I was writing, like, I feel like I want to create an e-commerce, something that's physical. I feel like I want to do something that's specifically in, the space of Christianity and building up that. I was still passionate about what I was doing, but I was like, man, this would be even greater. But looking back now, if I were to go back and do that, I see that more. I still see it. There's no difference between the secular and the sacred. It's all together. I think at that time I was still a little green and I was still serving them in a way. But if I had to go back now, I'd be like, oh God, thank you. This is still just the same,
Absolutely.
And to some degree, it's easier because, I still have pings of like, peddling a journal to Christians. And, we get those occasional comments like, I can't believe you're actually selling this and making a profit. I'm like, I can't believe I put food on the table for my kids either. I know. So, but there is that stigma sometimes. It's very rare.
Right.
But definitely looking back, I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting just kind of how that journey unfolds. It's like, you may not have seen it at that time, but now you can see that if you're ever led into a direction of, the similar work that you're doing before, an expansion on what you're doing, it's like now you have this mindset of this is all with God. All of this is with God. I could seek him. I could minister. I could flow with this thing with God. But yet the very journal that you created, I'm curious how you even came up with Kairos journal. Where would the revelation come concerning, Chronos and Kairos time? And in fact, I'd love for people who are just like, what are you even talking about? Break that down for those who don't know too. But talk to me about kind of the revelation of that for you.
Yeah, well, it was explained to me that summer. I actually did not know. Chronos is the sequential time that you can follow and track accordingly. And Kairos is that moment where there's no time attached to it. And as it relates to God, those are just those Kairos moments, those breakthrough moments. He really just breaks through to your heart, speaks to your soul, and just ministers. And I believe we all have them. And so when my friend, who I led a small group out in Breckenridge, Colorado, and he had called, we were catching up that summer, and I told him what I was doing. He's like, "Oh man, it sounds like you had a Kairos moment." I'm like, "What's a Kairos moment?" And then,
I love this.
I'm like, done. I know. I was like walking my dogs to the dog park. I'm like, that's what it is. It's Kairos journal.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that.
I didn't have a name for it. So
yeah, that's super good. And so now you got your name.
Yeah.
You got the Kairos journal. Now, you had never done e-commerce business before, right? Because everything you had done before that was in the service-based business.
Service-based and like info product, like we had some online courses, which, yeah.
Okay. Was there any kinds of fears, concerns, mindset you had to get over, kind of things you had to work through to fully embrace a completely different business model in e-commerce?
Oh, there still is to this day.
Talk to me about them.
Oh my gosh. I do miss the days of digital things. I'm not going to lie. Forgive me, Lord. I'm grateful for what I have. But
yes,
don't worry about overhead. You don't worry about expense. It's just like clean cut, boom. It's so clean. And with this, I mean, the first year we launched in 2019, we actually didn't really go all in until Q2 of 2020, right when COVID hit.
Yes.
And that year we ran out of stock like 3 times because I didn't know how to manage inventory. Then you fast forward to 2021, which is just last year, and I overbought inventory, like just so many terrible mistakes. So yeah, the process, it's still like, I'm like, how do people make this so clean? Like, how do they make it so clean? And it's just a learning curve bigger than I expected.
Yeah. What other kind of surprises have you experienced in this, and kind of, following the leading of the Lord in this, having this idea, walking out something new in business? Like what's been a surprise in the midst of this stuff?
What's been a surprise? Well, I think at first, like, I couldn't believe that it was happening. Like in the very beginning, I'm like, God, when's it going to fall apart? So my mindset had to shift. And then, you kind of ride that wave of like high and low. And I had to get to a point of just like, I'm still trying to get to that point of balance.
Yes.
How much can I do? I had a friend of mine, a good friend who's actually a pastor, who said, God's the greatest marketer. And I remember that was in 2019. I was like, yeah, he is, of course, but like I can market.
Right.
I'm like, I spent a lot of time repenting of things, like, like, God, I'm sorry. Like, I wanted to take control. And even to this day, like, how do you find that balance of letting go and still working and doing that and letting him do what he needs to do? Because
yes,
there's a million things I could be spending 24/7 on this thing, but I can't.
Right.
So how do you pick that?
Yes. So as you've been, and I think that's a very common journey for a lot of folks. And so what have been some of the areas that the Lord has really put on your heart to like let go of, and that you really had to trust him? And then you saw the goodness of what it looked like to release that to the Lord, and then yet continue to do your part.
Well, this is a good question because I've been going back and forth. So my expertise is really in the advertising realm, especially Facebook and Google. And so I felt, and I will admittedly, there wasn't a ton of prayer in this decision, but I thought like maybe it's time to let go and hire an agency to run this stuff. I just parted ways with my third agency at the beginning of 2022. So clearly that's one thing that I don't think is from the Lord. Like I tried to pass it off. And, there's so many different ways people do things, but it's never been true to us.
Right.
And so I think like this year, the Lord really showed me that I need to know my numbers. Like I really need to know my numbers. Like you got to know your P&L. You got to know the boring things. There's a lot of boring things that I've overlooked that I just never had to deal with before. And it's like, I don't want to deal with that. So I just push it off. And now I'm like, well, no, I really felt like March of this year, like you got to know your numbers.
Yes.
You got to know that. And you got to have better systems and processes, which we're still working through. And so I think there'd be a lot less stress with that, but I do think that's something the Lord's really showed me. And then of course, like letting go of certain things, like the assistants that we have, they love on our people. Renee and Emily, shout out to them. And they're just incredible. And just like giving them, I think I'm pretty good at letting go in that way and saying, hey,
yes,
don't ask me about everything. I want you to go.
Right.
So that's been a gift too.
Yeah, so good. So I'm gonna get like all up in your business in your right now. Mm-hmm. So first of all, do you use the daily Kairos journal yourself on a daily basis?
I do. I'm gonna be honest. Like I've been a little fluctuating. This is since June, so I'm a little off. But
yeah,
I
but it's a part of a rhythm of your life for the most part.
Yeah, it has been for sure.
So I want to know, so in your, what I'll call like daily business meetings with God, what's the Lord speaking to you now? What's like the stretch for you of the season? I know part of it is some of what you've shared, but what's the Holy Spirit messing with you on right now?
That's really good. That's really good. Well, it's been a really hard year for us for sure with things that Facebook has done and they've removed religious targeting, and a lot of my Christian entrepreneurs, e-commerce owners have felt it's just a theory. It's hard to prove that we've been hit harder than most. And so what that has led me to is something that I've probably been shoving away for a couple of years because again, it's not glamorous, it's not my strength, but really building the community and really being intentional with them in the online space.
Yes.
And showing up more my face. And it's not like a strong point of mine, but I know people do like to hear from the owner and founder. And so that's been something, and I still like kind of push it off, but that's been certainly an area. And we're getting ready for a big transition in our own lives because we're moving to Colorado. I'm actually going to be, a good friend of mine's a pastor at a small church out there. And so I'm going to be his assistant.
Oh, wow.
For at least a year. And so it's going to be this big stretch of like, well, now you have to let go. So like, how can I organize a day or a week to focus on what matters and let go of the rest?
Yes.
And so that community aspect's huge.
Yeah, that is big. What part of the business does your wife focus on?
She's focused primarily on, she handles our assistants, any questions, and she's just an email whiz. I mean, that girl can rock out an email she can do it so quickly. And then building out pages. I mean, I just told her today because we're getting ready to launch something. I'm like, hey, I got to build this page out. She's like, it'll take you at least a day. I'll just do it in 30 minutes. So she's so good with that.
I love it.
Yeah.
So now you guys working together. So that's a whole nother situation, when spouses work together in business. So like, what have been some of the keys for you guys to really grow and work well together? And, just it's the process, right? So what's the journey been like for you guys?
Yeah, the journey has been, don't get up all in my business all the time. Like that took a couple of years. And then, yeah, because anyone that's micromanaging is
right.
Yeah, but then having like defined roles and really separating. So Jordan's always, even before Kairos, she's been way better at the front-facing person than I am. So she's so good at engaging. So she's always handled those front-facing tasks where I've been more behind the scenes, building things out, advertising, doing the research, and that. So that's kind of we've made a separation, so it's not the same work. And then since last year, we implemented Traction by Phil Wickham. It's a great system. And so we've been doing weekly meetings, quarterly meetings. It helps us stay on track. So we use Notion and Slack and stuff. So it helps.
Yeah, that's good. And I know about that, of course, that impacted us as well, the Facebook shift in terms of targeting and all of that. So it having a pretty significant impact to your bottom line. I don't know how much of an impact that's been, but has part of this stretch been for you, like a lot of other business owners on the financial side and having to really trust God with the finances, in the midst of super lean things when you still have expenses and you still have these other things going on? What has that been like for you guys? Or did you already have kind of like you had extra, so it didn't hit you, you didn't feel it as much? No, but I know I've learned a lot about God as provider, God as provision himself in business life.
That's so good. Yeah, we've had to learn the same. It's been really hard, but it has made us like, it's really showed me that I can't be lazy with things. Like I don't think I stewarded as well as I could have. I'm still learning, but really want to be a better steward with expenses and advertising. That's like been a main driver for us. And in some areas, I haven't been the greatest there either. There's some things I can button up, so that's been revealed. And then obviously just trusting him. And then there's some like innovation there too. Like we are considering some other things that might be cool for the Kairos community. So yeah.
Very cool. That was actually what I was gonna ask you next, in terms of, at least in terms of what you can share. Like, what do you see? Like, what's happening here? What's the vision God's giving you around Daily Kairos going forward?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's 100% clear yet, but like I said, I think it does build off of that community because that's been in the back of my mind for so long, and how we can connect online. And so really just wanting to listen better. We just sent out a survey today actually, and just figure out what people, why they're using it, what they're looking for, and how we can just provide more value
Yeah.
and engage with them. So from there, like maybe building out some more resources that would actually help, would actually, give people strength in the Lord and give them space. And we did a survey like a year and a half ago, and it was interesting because like almost over half of the survey people said they use the journal because of time issues. So like that was kind of, I thought it'd be discipline or habit, but that's kind of like shifted our gears onto some other products and things there too. And yeah, because the journal doesn't solve your time issue at all.
Right.
But that's just the reality. But we have some cool products that I don't even think I've shared to our list. Like I had in 2020, when things were good, I had someone build out a Google Chrome extension, and it's just like you can set a timer on it. So X amount of time throughout the day, it takes over your screen, and it just makes you have like a countdown timer of 2 minutes of prayer. That's a big part of our thing, is like constant prayer throughout the day.
Yes.
So equipping believers in every way with technology and with the analog stuff.
Oh, that's really good. So that's the thought. It's like, so we can serve people in this area of helping them to kind of live a life of ongoing engagement with God. And we could do that with these physical products that they'll engage God with, but there's also technology, and there's also community, and it's like all of those various aspects of how they come together in terms of how you can serve. Well, I'll tell you what, the reason why I was really excited when I found your journal, I don't know how I even found it. I think it stumbled upon an ad in my Instagram or something like that. And then somebody who is one of the listeners of the podcast and said, oh, I think I mentioned, she's like, oh, I love that journal. So I was like, okay, cool. I should dig in and look at that. But one of the things in this book behind me that I wrote, Grace Over Grind, How Grace Will Take Your Business Where Grinding Can't. One of the key components in there is around daily business meetings with God. And a lot of times people ask me for tools that help them in their engagement with God. So a lot of times you're like, okay, well, give me an agenda. I'm like, I'm not giving you an agenda, but I'll give you some frameworks and some thoughts and some ideas on how you really practically engage God in your business. But I was excited to find that as just like a super practical tool of, here, take this, take this and document, because that's a big part of it, is like engaging God and documenting the journey, having a space where you have documented history of your adventure with God, right? I mean, there's so much goodness in that. And that's why I was excited about what you guys were doing. So it's super good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's so easy. We are forgetful people.
Yeah.
There's so many components of it that we never really share. But the reason why we have the back to reflect, is so that you can actually look back and see what God has said. And so like one thing that we've put on the back burner project-wise, but now that you're saying it again, it's like I gotta bring it back up, is like having a summation of those quarterly or yearly, because then you can have that compiled and like, oh man, look how good God's been.
Yes.
You're struggling in an area. Well, it's not just a one-off, that's been for a year.
Yeah.
So we forget.
Yeah, that's so good. Do you were talking about, kind of expansion in areas, since you're still learning all these lessons on the physical side and inventory and all of that stuff, does that have you feeling gun shy about adding more physical products? Or you're like, no, like I'm excited to like grab this bull by the horns and expand there? Or you're like, no, not yet. Not yet. Cause there's some things I really need to work through on here. How you feeling?
Oh, if I had the sharks give me money, I would be creating new physical products day and night. When we were cruising and business was good, really good last year, that was the beauty, because I was just pumping out ideas, and I have a whole idea book. So it's just a matter of
so that's just who you are. You're just like an innovator. You've got ideas upon ideas.
I'm the idea guy, for better for worse. So many. I have too many ideas, but they're in a book, and it's a matter of not if but when. So
yes,
it doesn't scare me.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so good. We should probably have another conversation offline. This is good. I love it. Yeah. So let me ask you this before I let you go. What advice would you have for someone who's listening, who's really feeling like, they're already in business perhaps, or maybe they're not, but they're really feeling a bit gun shy on this thing that God's put on their heart in e-commerce specifically, because they have like concerns or fears or whatever around all the dynamics that come with having an e-commerce with a physical product type of business, what advice would you give them? What encouragement and advice would you give that person listening?
Yeah. Well, if I could go back and do it again, I would say, granted, my background is the marketing and the direct to consumer stuff. So, but I would say for that person, especially if they're still working a job, is to make the product and use the product and share the product and then whatever parts of that product, different pillars of it, talk about those individually and just start building interest. And you can do that for free. You can do that with MailChimp and separate Instagram, and you can create a lot of interest or not interest and see if people really aren't interested and get feedback very affordably, very quickly. And then you can kind of quench is the wrong word, but you can kind of stoke the fire, I guess, of that. And you can start to get feelers before you just, I feel like I see a lot of people just like, oh, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to do this thing without whatever. So you can test the waters and you can feel good about actually creating that physical thing, because that was the greatest moment of having it.
Yes.
And kind of feel where it's going, and if that's the area you want to go into.
Yeah, super good.
I would say do that yesterday, because these days you can have an idea and make a physical product in less than a week with anything. Really.
Did you guys hear that?
Not if you're making a Tesla, but anything self-publishing wise, even in the obviously retail space, the clothing, accessories, it's all out there. So
good stuff. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing, and I'm excited to hear and to watch how you guys continue to grow, and how these Kairos moments that you're having, that your wife's having with the Lord, lead to continued innovation, growth, at working at the pace of the grace of God on the business that you guys are doing. And so excited for you and your transition as well to Colorado. Just super good stuff. I appreciate you sharing with us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shay.
And you guys go to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/journal and go check out this journal. It's awesome. So go check it out. And Pete, also, you guys are on Instagram. So your Daily Kairos, shout out your social media handles.
Oh man, now we're Daily Kairos on Facebook. I think we're Daily Kairos on Instagram, but there might be a dot in there. So let me check real quick. That's how,
all right.
How well I know. Yeah. Daily.Kairos on Instagram, Daily Kairos on Facebook, and should be Daily Kairos on TikTok, the up and coming, but we're not really going crazy there. So
and maybe we'll start to see more of Pete on the social media channels. That's what I'm going to be looking out for. So that's how the Lord's leading you.
Amen.
There you go. Thanks so much for joining us, Pete. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys too. Thank you.
Enjoy my chat with Pete Jones, creator of the Daily Kairos Journal, which is super great journal. Mr. Bynes, our CEO, and my dear husband is with me, and we're going to talk about some takeaways. So, Phil, what's going on?
All is well, my love.
I feel like you have something else to say.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was going to say, you're right. We're going to talk about some takeaways. You better believe it. And then I realized, no, I don't have the space to say that without interrupting you. So I just paused, but you know me so well that you asked anyway.
Yes. All right. Well, share your takeaways from my conversation with Pete.
Yeah, cool. So the first takeaway I have from your conversation with Pete is, when your work becomes hard, it is a sign that you may no longer be in alignment. And that is from the story of his second job that was paying very well. Right. And then all of a sudden he felt like his sales efforts were like him selling to a wall, I think he said. And I was like, yep, we just exited alignment, right?
The grace is gone. As my friend Matt Tommy said, the dove has left the building.
That is it. Yeah. The second point I have here is, in the busy seasons of life, when you have no time or it is hard to gain clarity, stop striving for a moment, right? God can in will give you Kairos moments that can revolutionize what you are doing. And so this is a story of him. I think he said it was with his first child, and he's just didn't have space, the bandwidth in his mind for work even. He was trying to work. He was on his laptop and he was getting nowhere, and he just closed the laptop. And in that moment of just closing the laptop and putting it down, God, interrupted with a Kairos moment, and he got this full download for something that he needed to do in his business.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a
productivity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the third point I have here is when working closely with your spouse, be prepared to have well-defined roles so that you don't get on each other's nerves. Now, I know this is not for everybody that works with their spouse, right? But if you guys have very strong personality differences on what you think, versus what the other one thinks, it would be a good idea to have well-defined roles so that you don't get on each other's nerves.
Nice practical tip.
That's right.
That's good. I was sharing this with you offline about one of the things I really loved about listening to his story, which I didn't know his story, before hopping on with him. I just knew a little bit about it. And his story reminds me a lot of my own in some ways. When I think about, 10 years ago, when I had that moment, March 2012, where it was like, what flew out of my mouth in that conversation with Antonina is, it's a community, it's a movement, and it starts with a book concerning kingdom-driven entrepreneur. And saying those words out of my mouth, essentially having much of a Kairos moment. But I didn't know what a kingdom-driven entrepreneur was. And in the process of saying yes to the assignment and walking it out, I was becoming while I was doing the assignment. And that struck me as I was listening to Pete, because in so many ways, he's becoming, like he said, yes, he got this great God idea around this journal, didn't even know what the word Kairos meant, didn't have that word in his vocabulary. The Lord brings that, to him. He then launches this wonderful tool, but in the process of doing this business, it's like he's learning Kairos living in the process of distributing, manufacturing and distributing a Kairos journal, and I just love the beauty of when we say yes to God and just how these things begin to really come together for us. And that should be encouraging. And this is why I love telling my story about how Kingdom-Driven Entrepreneur started. I love telling this story because it lets you know, the world's perspective is like, you have to have this particular level of expertise, in order to walk into something, when it's like, no, it's like, if God said it, you can do it. Just go do it with him. So I loved that aspect of his story.
That's great, my love. And I don't have anything to add because I don't want to step on the point that you just made, because it really, now I got something to add because I started talking.
Go ahead.
Because it's good that we constantly have stories that represent different parts of the journey for different people.
Yes.
Right. Because if you're a newbie and you haven't really had that experience from God yet, it's hard to listen to someone that is way far in advance. Like they've done that a long time ago and they're in a totally different place. But you're like, well, how did you get there? And you can't even comprehend it. But when you see someone that is closely aligned with where you currently are walking this thing out, it helps to encourage you that you can do it too.
Yeah. And then you think about the fact that he's in a new business, and there's that thing to kind of be inspired by too. Someone who's like, I've done business another type of way and was, did really well there, but now I'm having to learn how to do another type of business with this great God idea, and just the goodness of God to walk us through that. So good stuff. All right, you guys who are listening, I want to share with you a new resource that we put together that I'm pretty excited about. It's called Seek First the Kingdom, 12 Powerful Questions to Connect You with God's Heart and Mind in Business. And basically what this is it's a 8-page digital resource that I wrote to help you to engage God more powerfully and intentionally in your business. I mean, that's what we're all about here, among plenty of other things, in doing this business as a kingdom-driven entrepreneur. But I really feel like this is a tool that can help you get started with engaging God in some ways that you may not have engaged God before in your business. So I want to encourage you to grab that resource. It costs you free $99, $0, free $99. And if you go over to meetingwithgod.biz. That's meetingwithgod.biz, B-I-Z. You can get that resource for free. So I encourage you to do that. And then once you've done that, that'll also, of course, connect you to, Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. You'll be subscribed to our email list, and we'll share other goodness of what's going on over here to help you along your journey of doing business in partnership with God, led and empowered by the Holy Spirit. You can experience His best and have a greater kingdom impact through the work that you're doing in the marketplace. Mr. Vines, before we go, is there anything that you needed to share before we take off?
No, we're good, my love.
All right, very good. Well, we will talk to you more next week on the next episode of the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. Take care and God bless.
Thanks for joining us on the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we encourage you to subscribe and spread the word. And don't forget, you can gain access to even more resources, plus a thriving community of fire starters by visiting our website at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.